Hello. Welcome to our channel, The Horror Girls. Time travel and parallel universe have interested people for ages. But being interested in them and actually experiencing them can be different. It can be both physically and mentally exhausting. Here are 6 out of the world true stories by people who have gone through this in their lives. This first story is by a user called Movies Nerd, and this was written under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. So here is my story. I am 15 and I've been having nightmares. I am having the same nightmares every night. Every time in my nightmare I hear a name, and that is Robert Herrick. I always heard this name, so I assumed I might be a reincarnation of some Robert Herrick guy. Then I searched that name, and found out he was a famous poet from the 16th century. I was shocked. I shared this with nobody. In my nightmare, I don't only hear the name, but I also see some stuff. I used to see myself shooting a woman exactly in the middle of her forehead, and I used to wake up after that. One day I took a nap and the things I saw were extraordinary. I saw myself wearing a hat and a long coat. I had a badge and there was this horse beside a house. I walked inside the house. I walked slowly and I entered a room. I saw the same woman I had seen in my nightmares. She was shouting at me, and I shot her exactly in the middle of her forehead. I didn't wake up, so I saw what happened next. Another woman went there shouting help. A man came wearing similar clothing like me. He also had a badge. He pulled his gun, shot me in the head, and I woke up. And by the way, I have a mark on my forehead where I was shot in story number 2. This story is by a user named Kira Posse, and I found this under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. One day me and my mom were driving on Route 40 in Maryland. A super long stretch of highway. I was probably only like 4 or 5 and I was sleeping at that time. But my mom remembers it vividly, still brings it up, and still gets very scared by it. So we're driving down Route 40, and at some point traffic started to build up a tiny bit on her lane, so she slowed down into a stop. When she did, she says she literally blinked and she was suddenly surrounded by super thick fog. She kind of re-blinked and rubbed her eyes, completely dumbfounded with the thought, where did the road and the cars go? Keep in mind I'm in the back seat sleeping, and she is all alone. So she rolls down her window, and the air was 100% still. She said it had to have been the same temperature as her body outside, because it didn't even feel slightly hot or cold. She steps out of the car in hopes that she can see the road and maybe pull over to the side of it, because at this point she thinks she stopped in the middle of the highway and can't see anything around her. She was scared that she'll get side-swapped by other cars. But there is no road or divider in the way, no sounds, and describes it as literally standing in the cloud. There was no ground. She was scared to venture out farther because she didn't want to accidentally lose sight of her car and of me in the back seat. So she retreats back to the car and sits in the driver's seat, locks her doors and puts her head on the steering wheel and starts sobbing into the wheel, confused as to what to do. And when she looks back up, all the fog is completely gone and the car in front of her just started driving forward again. Meanwhile, cars pass her rapidly in the right lane as if nothing ever happened. Yet she said she was in this weird fog for a good 5 to 6 minutes at least. When it happened, it was a totally cloudless sunny day. We still can't explain other than being trapped in a time loop. Story 3. This story is by Julian. I found this under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. When I was in elementary school, I watched Premonition on the couch with my mom and dad. I thought it was an amazing movie, and told everyone about it at school the next day. At first they just looked confused. I thought that they just hadn't heard of it. I mean, it hadn't been out for long, so I just told them it's a newer movie. Then my friend looked at me and said that it wasn't out yet. This caused an argument as I had just seen it and I told her she didn't know what she was talking about. So when I got home, I told my mom about what had happened. She looked at me confused and told me my friend was right and I must have dreamt it. At first I just decided to go with it even though I was so sure we had watched it. A few months later Premonition came out, so we watched it. This time it was my mom, my dad, me and my older sister. After watching it I was convinced the first time it wasn't a dream at all. Everything I saw the first time happened this time. I was rewatching the movie. To this day I cannot explain it. Story 4. This story is by Jake and I found this under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. All my life I was told that my dad's birthday was on the 15th of August and we always celebrated it as such. Then from the year I turned 14 or 15, we celebrated it on the 14th and I asked why. My mom and everyone said, why not? It's his birthday. Because of which I was confused because my birthday is 14th April, and if this was so I would have remembered because why would I forget? Both of us would be 14s, just different months. Till this day nobody believes that I recalled that day and say that I'm nuts. But I was a curious kid because which kid isn't? And I asked a lot of questions. There was no reason I would remember something wrong, especially as a kid. You make all the connections to yourself. Him being on the 14th would have been locked in my memory. Just because of the connection. Story 5. This story is by Helen Lulu, and I found this under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. Posting from my GF's account, but there was this one time when I was 17 and I had just gotten my license. My best friend and I were driving home from a town over, and on a road we'd both been on 1,000 times, growing up. But we were about 10 to 15 out, on an hour-long drive, and then we turned the corner onto the darker part of the road and we drove at a steady pace all the way along for what felt like 2 to 3 hours. What started out with fun times, talking, laughing and generally enjoying the trip, slowly calmed. Turning to silence after a while as we stared at the road ahead with unease. We both looked at each other in the same instant and stated that we should have been home by now. With confusion we looked back at the road, and at the right moment, just when we acknowledged the fact that something felt odd, we turned the next bend and came to the halfway point in the trip. The rest of the drive seeming normal, and talking barely a fraction of the time as the first half, we talked about what happened. We looked down at the clock and it was showing the extra time. I still drive the road often now, 4 years later, never experiencing the same occurrence and never taking more than 45 minutes to make the drive. I don't know what happened to this day. My friend and I still talk about it sometimes. Story 6. This story is by Caleb Chavez, and I found this under a parallel universe thread on YouTube. When I was younger, around 8, my sister and I used to share a room which was connected to a bathroom. One day, we were playing hide and seek in the house and she accidentally locked herself in the room. This wasn't a problem at the moment as I just went through the other door and let her out that way. Later that day, when we were telling our parents about it, my mom seemed confused on how I let her out with the door locked, and I told her we went through the other door, and I went to show her to find out there was no such door connected to the bathroom. Needless to say, we had to take off the doorknob to open the door again and unlock it. But to this day my sister and I still remember that door being there and can't figure out why only we remember it. Or how I got her out of the room if there really was only door and it was locked from inside. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it, please don't forget to let us know in the comment section below and show us some appreciation so we can keep posting videos with your love and support by subscribing and sharing our video. If this video gets to 100 likes and 50 comments, we will make a part 2 of the video and broaden the horizon. Bye. BTW, let us know if you have experienced something like this or not.